disrespect, contempt, indifference. 3 words that, unfortunately, still define the reality for many people. And that's exactly what Dona Thompson faced when she tried to board her flight: an impatient airline attendant, a cancelled first-class reservation with no explanation, and a cold, dismissive attitude, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. This wasn't about a system glitch or a last-minute change. It was about how some people are treated when they don't look like they have status or power. What the airline didn't know: she was the grandmother of Keanu Reeves, one of the company's stakeholders. What seemed like just another case of everyday disrespect quickly escalated into something much bigger. Who hasn't been in a situation like this? Standing in line, waiting your turn, only to watch someone with an important name cut right in front of you. You stay polite, you follow the rules, yet you're ignored. And the worst part? It's not just the mistake itself, it's the coldness with which it happens. And there, in the airport, surrounded by silent witnesses, Dona Thompson was about to become yet another victim of this cruel reality. But what no one expected was that this story was about to take a completely unexpected turn. Keanu Reeves, known for his humility and strong sense of justice, heard what had happened, and the way he responded wasn't just surprising, it was a powerful life lesson. Without yelling, without making a scene, he turned what could have been just another overlooked case of disrespect into a global event. More than that, he proved that respect should never depend on last names or social influence. The fallout from this story didn't just go viral, it sparked a much bigger question: why is dignity only granted when someone powerful demands it? Do we really need a Keanu Reeves to step in just to ensure basic human decency? This isn't just about one incident, it's a reflection of something far greater. And what happened next proved that when someone decides to take a stand, the whole world starts paying attention. Dona Thompson arrived at the airport with the calmness of someone who has lived through many stories and doesn't get shaken easily. But nothing could have prepared her for the cold, indifferent way she was treated. When she handed over her ticket, she expected a routine process, but instead, she was met with an impatient stare and a sharp tone. "Your reservation has been changed," the airline attendant said without even looking up. No explanation. No apology. No consideration. What should have been a smooth, uneventful trip was suddenly turning into a test of patience. Always polite, the elderly woman tried to understand what was happening. She calmly asked for a reason, but all she got were vague answers and an impatient hand gesture telling her to move along. And here's the real issue: this wasn't about a first-class seat, it was about respect. How many times have we seen or experienced something similar? People being treated as if they don't matter, as if they're asking for a favor when all they want is basic decency. What happened to simple courtesy? For anyone, this would have been frustrating. For an elderly woman, it was even worse. After all, the least you expect when traveling is to be treated with dignity. But to some companies, customers are just numbers, and humanity gets lost in the cold logic of corporate policies. The airline didn't even have the decency to inform her in advance. They simply threw it at her last minute, as if her presence there had no value. And here's a major life lesson: sometimes, it's not the situation itself that hurts, but the way we're treated. This could have been a technical issue, a system error, even a scheduling mistake. All of that would have been understandable if there had been just a little empathy. But there wasn't. There was neglect. There was indifference. And that's how many injustices happen daily, not through direct words, but through what is denied: respect, attention, and the simple recognition that someone deserves a clear answer. Across the airport, a company employee named Matthew had been watching everything. He noticed Dona Thompson's discomfort and the airline attendant's dismissive tone. Something about this wasn't right. Then he checked the system and recognized her last name. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that name. And unlike the attendant, he knew that this elderly woman wasn't alone. A simple mistake could turn into a storm, and it was about to. How often do we underestimate people? Judging them by their appearance, their tone of voice, their age. And this silent prejudice can come at a high cost. What happened to Dona Thompson was not an isolated case. Every day, people are dismissed simply because they seem ordinary, while privileges are handed out to those with status. But this story was about to take a dramatic turn, proving that some of life's biggest lessons only come when justice steps in. And this is exactly where everything starts to change. While the airline assumed this elderly woman would quietly accept their treatment, they didn't realize a key player had just entered the game: Keanu Reeves. He wasn't just a caring grandson. He was a man of influence, a man of principles, and someone who refuses to let injustice go unnoticed. The moment he heard what happened, he took action immediately. And what came next would prove that no one gets ignored without consequences. Across the city, a phone started ringing inside the airline's headquarters. And the person who picked up had no idea what they were about to face. Keanu Reeves doesn't yell. He doesn't threaten. He solves things. And when someone like him decides to act, the impact is unstoppable. What did he do? Well, you're going to want to hear this. Because what seemed like just a minor administrative mistake was about to turn into a story of transformation and inspiration. Dona Thompson was never one to complain. Life had already taught her that patience is worth more than gold. But that day, she felt something different. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't frustration, it was a mix of shock and indignation. Not because of the seat, but because of the way she was treated. The attendant didn't even look her in the eyes. She scrolled through the computer screen like she was picking a meal from a delivery app and, without lifting her head, bluntly stated, "Your reservation has been changed. You're now an economy." As if she were doing her a favor. And that was the moment something snapped inside Dona Thompson. She had seen this movie before. How many times had people like her been dismissed, discarded, treated as an afterthought? But this time, she refused to be just another forgotten story. Keeping her composure, she asked for an explanation. And that's when the final straw landed. The attendant sighed, rolled her eyes, and muttered impatiently, "I don't make the rules, ma'am." Oh, my friend, who hasn't wished they could rewrite a moment like this? This wasn't about the seat. It was about the humiliation of being treated like a walking inconvenience. As if she were wrong for asking for a simple explanation. And the worst part? No one around her seemed to care. Or rather, they all noticed, but chose to ignore it. The silence of bystanders has always been the greatest ally of injustice. But justice has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. In that afternoon, it was about to make an entrance, in the most unexpected way possible. As Dona Thompson swallowed her frustration, wondering whether it was even worth insisting, a man in a sharp suit and tie approached. Tall, well-dressed, with a Bluetooth earpiece in his ear, he looked like an important executive. She assumed he was just another impatient traveler, about to cut in line. But no. He pulled out a badge from his pocket, glanced at the computer screen, and furrowed his brows. Then, turning to the elderly woman, he asked, as if he already knew the answer, "Are you Mrs. Thompson?" The attendant went pale. Her once bored face now looked like a map of panic. The man in the suit crossed his arms and stared at the computer screen. "Can you explain why her reservation was changed?" The room fell silent. Everyone watching the scene started to realize that something big was happening. And suddenly, the game had changed. This wasn't just an elderly woman trying to fight for her rights. This was someone who knew the right people. And, my friend, when you mess with the wrong person, life has a way of making you pay quickly. If there's one thing people never expect, it's for a small incident to trigger a domino effect. But this was one of those moments. The executive typed something on his phone, and within seconds, the airline's computer system froze. The attendant frantically clicked the mouse, pressed buttons, but nothing worked. That's when he looked directly at her and said something that changed everything. "Don't worry. We're already handling it. Someone bigger than you is aware of this." The attendant froze. Who, exactly, was behind this? Dona Thompson had no idea that her grandson was already aware of everything. And the craziest part? He didn't find out through a phone call. Not through an email. He saw it happening in real time. That's right, someone, somewhere in that airport, had live-streamed the situation to a place it was never supposed to reach. And that someone bigger than you was about to change everything. Want to know how? Oh, my friend, buckle up, because this story is just getting started. Matthew was not the kind of guy who liked attention. He had been working for the airline for years and knew that problems like this happened all the time. But that day, something inside him told him to act. When he saw the name Thompson on the screen, a chill ran down his spine. There was no way they were making such a huge mistake. Without hesitation, he did what no one expected. He stepped in. He walked up to the attendant and asked to check the system. She tried to brush him off, saying everything was fine, but he wasn't buying it. With a firm tone, he demanded to know why the reservation had been changed. And that's when the ugly truth came out. Dona Thompson's seat had been given to another passenger. Not just anyone. Someone important. Someone the airline apparently believed was more valuable than an elderly woman traveling alone. The coldness of the situation deeply bothered him. How could they treat an elderly woman like she was disposable? Worse still, they were about to do this to the grandmother of one of the most influential men in the world. Matthew knew that if he didn't fix this right there, the problem would only get bigger. And when problems get bigger, it's the employees who take the fall, not the executives. Matthew pulled out his phone and quickly typed out a message. If upper management found out what was happening, things would change instantly. But before he could hit send, a notification popped up on his screen. Someone has already informed Keanu Reeves. He froze for a second. Took a deep breath. So, the problem had already reached the top? He had no idea how, but somehow, the information was already spreading behind the scenes. The airline attendant, who had been so dismissive before, was now visibly nervous. She tried to act casual, but it was clear she was worried. What had started as a small operational issue was now turning into a full-blown scandal. And if there's one thing big companies hate, it's bad publicity. Especially when it involves the name of a global celebrity. Matthew turned to look at Dona Thompson. She was still calm, composed, but clearly uncomfortable. He thought about how many people had gone through situations like this and simply accepted it. How many stories of disrespect had gone unheard just because no one had the power or influence to change the rules. But this time, the story wouldn't end in silence. Across the terminal, he noticed other employees whispering. Some were frantically texting, others exchanged worried glances. Something was happening in the background, and Matthew knew this wasn't small. Because when Keanu Reeves gets involved, things don't just stop halfway. And that's when the phone rang at the airline's headquarters. On the other end, a serious voice asked to speak to the supervisor in charge. The game had just flipped. And what happened next would prove that no one, absolutely no one, is above respect. Want to know what happened next? Hold that thought, because now, the story is about to get really intense. Across the ocean, Keanu Reeves was in the middle of a meeting when his phone vibrated. It wasn't just any message. It was a video. When he hit play, he saw his grandmother, Dona Thompson, being treated with blatant disregard at the airport. The cold tone of the attendant, the obvious discomfort on her face, the whispers in the background, everything unfolding in front of his eyes like a bad movie. And if there's one thing Keanu Reeves can't stand, it's seeing someone he loves being disrespected. Without hesitation, he grabbed his phone and called the airline's headquarters directly. "Hello, this is Keanu Reeves. I want an explanation for what's happening to my grandmother." Silence on the other end of the line. A few seconds later, a tense voice replied. "Mr. Reeves, we are aware of the situation and are already handling it." But he wasn't looking for weak excuses. He wanted action. Keanu wasn't the kind to cause a scene. He had always valued humility and discretion. But in that moment, he knew he had to be firm. "I'm not asking for a favor. I'm demanding that you treat my grandmother with the respect that every person deserves." His voice was calm, but it carried an authority that didn't come from fame, it came from his strong sense of justice. And when someone like Keanu Reeves speaks, people listen. On the other end of the call, the airline's executives started to panic. This was no longer just a customer complaint, this was about to explode into a PR nightmare. They could already see the headline. Airline humiliates elderly woman, without knowing she's Keanu Reeves' grandmother. An absolute disaster. And with social media? A story like this could go viral in seconds. In a world where reputation is everything, this was a crisis they needed to contain immediately. Meanwhile, back at the airport, things were shifting. Employees suddenly changed their behavior. The same attendant who had treated Dona Thompson with indifference minutes ago now looked nervous. Whispers started spreading. Worried glances were exchanged. They all realized that something big was happening behind the scenes. And when power moves fast, it's because something massive is unfolding. Keanu knew that a simple apology wouldn't be enough. Because how many times had situations like this happened without a famous name involved? How many ordinary people had been disrespected, without anyone fighting for them? He didn't just want to get his grandmother's seat back. He wanted the airline to rethink the way it treated people. Because this wasn't just about a system error. It was about a culture of disrespect that far too many people face every day. Then, the phone rang again. This time, it was the airline's executives, officially apologizing. "Mr. Reeves, we've already taken care of everything. Your grandmother's seat has been restored, and she will receive a formal apology." But was that really enough? Keanu was about to make a move that no one saw coming. Something that would make sure this story wasn't forgotten anytime soon. What did he do? Oh, this was more than just a demand. Because now, this story was about to take a huge turn, and this time, it wouldn't just shake up the airline. The whole world was about to see it. In the midst of all the chaos, one crucial detail had yet to be revealed: who, exactly, had taken Dona Thompson's seat. Keanu Reeves wanted answers, and when Keanu wants something, things happen. He asked his team to investigate the situation, and within minutes, the truth came out. His grandmother's first-class seat had been given to a VIP passenger, someone so influential that the airline thought it was worth ignoring the dignity of an elderly woman just to accommodate them. And that's when the story took a completely unexpected turn. Keanu decided this situation wouldn't be handled in silence. He went live on his social media and, in his calm but firm style, exposed the entire situation. "My grandmother had her first-class reservation taken away without any explanation. And now, guess what? Her seat was given to someone else. Let's find out who this important passenger is, someone apparently worth more than an elderly woman." The impact was immediate. Thousands of people flooded into the live stream. And at the airline's headquarters? Panic. Meanwhile, at the airport, the tension was thick in the air. The VIP passenger, who had been enjoying his new first-class seat, suddenly felt the weight of every stare around him. He picked up his phone. Opened Twitter. And that's when his face went pale. His name was already spreading across social media. The hashtag Justice for Dona Thompson was climbing the trending list. And suddenly, he realized he was at the center of a storm that had barely begun. Desperate to contain the crisis, the airline acted fast. A staff member approached the VIP passenger, speaking quietly but firmly. "Sir, you will have to change seats." The man protested, but one glance around the cabin told him he had no choice. Dozens of phones were recording. If he refused, he would instantly become the internet's newest villain. Realizing he was cornered, he stood up, adjusted his suit, and walked away, trying to maintain whatever dignity he had left. But at that moment, the story was no longer about him. It was about what this situation represented. How many times have power and status bent the rules to favor some while disrespecting others? How many stories like this go unnoticed simply because there isn't a famous person there to fight back? But this time, the game had changed. And it wasn't just Keanu Reeves who was outraged anymore. Now, the public was involved. And when millions of people demand justice, not even the biggest airline in the world can afford to ignore it. Through it all, Dona Thompson remained calm. She never wanted a scandal or the spotlight. She only wanted to travel with dignity. But what happened that day proved a major point. No one should need a famous grandson just to be treated with respect. And that was the real spark that ignited something much bigger. The case was already making headlines. Reporters were calling the airline for official statements. TV networks wanted to interview Keanu. The story was far from over. And what happened next would prove that this wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon. Because now, justice was being served, and in a way that no one saw coming. The damage was already done. The airline, which had tried to sweep the problem under the rug, now found itself at the center of a storm. Senior management went into full crisis mode. Emergency meetings were called. Crisis consultants were brought in. And in the end, they realized they had only one viable option: admit the mistake. The company released an official statement apologizing to Dona Thompson. But the question remained: was an apology really enough? Meanwhile, at the airport, the tension was palpable. Employees were rushing around, trying to fix the mess. The VIP passenger, who had taken Dona Thompson's seat, was now doing his best to avoid cameras and stares. But the real focus was on a different moment. A high-ranking supervisor, dressed in a perfectly pressed uniform, walked up to Dona Thompson. He cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and, with visible discomfort, said, "Mrs. Thompson, we'd like to sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. Your first-class seat has been restored. Please accept our apologies." With the grace and wisdom that only experience brings, Dona Thompson smiled gently. But her words were sharp and direct. "I don't want privileges. I just want respect." And there it was, the real lesson in all of this. Dona Thompson wasn't looking for special treatment, free upgrades, or corporate gifts. She only wanted the basics, to be treated with the same dignity as any other passenger. But the problem is, basic human decency is often denied to those who don't appear important in the eyes of the world. Keanu Reeves, watching everything unfold from a distance, knew that his mission was complete. But he also understood that this went far beyond his grandmother. How many people go through this every single day without anyone standing up for them? How often is respect only granted when someone powerful demands it? This needed to change. The media firestorm only grew stronger. News outlets around the world started reporting the story. Social media exploded with people sharing their own similar experiences. The incident became more than just one event, it became a symbol of a much bigger issue: how society treats those without power or status. As the backlash intensified, the airline rushed to announce a complete review of its customer service policies, desperate to salvage its reputation. Dona Thompson, meanwhile, boarded her first-class seat as she had originally booked. But the most remarkable part wasn't that she got her seat back. Before settling in, she looked around, saw a nervous flight attendant nearby, and with a calm, reassuring smile, said, "Don't worry, dear. What matters isn't the mistake, it's what we learn from it." That was her final lesson of the day, and perhaps, the most powerful of all. But was this really the end of the story? Or was it just the beginning of something much bigger? Because the truth is, this wasn't just about a flight. It was about empathy, respect, and what it truly means to treat someone with dignity. The fallout from this case was massive. What started as a simple administrative mistake quickly escalated into a global debate on respect and empathy. The hashtag Justice for Dona Thompson continued to trend, and this incident became a textbook example of how status still dictates how people are treated. But the big question is, did this case actually change anything? Or was it only different because a famous name was involved? The truth is, this story touched and outraged so many people because, deep down, we've all been there. Who hasn't felt ignored? Who hasn't been treated as if they didn't matter? What happened to Dona Thompson was an uncomfortable reminder that too often, dignity is only given when someone powerful demands it. But should it be that way? And then comes an even deeper question. How many similar stories never make it to the headlines? How many people, without a Keanu Reeves by their side, simply accept injustice and move on? This case forces us to reflect. What can we do to ensure that respect is a right for everyone, not a privilege for a few? Once again, social media proved its power. If this hadn't gone viral, this situation might have been ignored entirely. But the internet didn't just expose the mistake. It turned one person's struggle into a collective movement. It was public pressure that forced the airline to take action. This proves something powerful. When we stand together for a just cause, we can change the course of things. Keanu Reeves never had to yell, threaten, or make a scene. He simply used his influence to ensure his grandmother was treated with respect. And that is a powerful example. Many times, it's not about force, it's about strategy. Knowing when and how to act. And above all, understanding that fighting for justice isn't just about correcting personal wrongs. It's about making sure others don't have to go through the same thing. Dona Thompson continued her journey, but she left a mark. Her story became a symbol of the importance of empathy and fair treatment. And maybe, this is the biggest lesson of all. Respect should never be tied to famous last names or social status. It should be the standard, not the exception. And now, the real question is, did this case truly make people reflect? Or, once the dust settles, will everything just go back to normal? That's not an easy question to answer. But one thing is certain. Each of us has the power to decide how we will act the next time we witness injustice. And that's exactly what we need to talk about. Because this story doesn't end here. If anything, it opens the door to something much bigger. And now, the responsibility of continuing this conversation is in our hands. So the question is, what will we do with it? Well, that answer depends on each one of us. So, what does the story teach us? That respect is still a privilege for a select few? That without an influential name behind us, we remain invisible? Or that real change happens when someone refuses to accept the unacceptable? Keanu Reeves didn't have to yell, didn't have to threaten. He simply did what so many people wish they could do. He demanded respect. But the real question is, do we only get justice when someone powerful steps in? Because this story isn't just about a first-class seat. It's about something much bigger. It's about how appearances still dictate who gets treated with dignity and who gets ignored. How many times have we seen this happen? At a store, in a restaurant, at work. There are always those who are seen as important, while others are treated as if they don't matter. What happened to Dona Thompson is a mirror of that reality. So now, I ask you, what if this had happened to you? On your next trip, your next customer service experience, your next business deal? What if you were treated like you didn't matter? Would you stay silent? Or would you demand respect? And even more importantly, if you saw someone else going through this, would you stand up for them? Or would you stay quiet and look the other way? Because, in the end, our choices shape the kind of society we live in. If you believe that stories like this need to be told and discussed, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video. Because the more people reflect on this, the less likely it is that situations like this will continue to happen. Respect is not up for negotiation. And this is a conversation that needs to keep going. Are you with us?